Welcome to Small Town Values, our first episode without Doug Cabral. Doug, we love you. We miss you. Today we have Jason Peters, Paul Romanelli, and Benjamin Doroski. Ben Doroski, welcome to the show. Jason, let's start with you. We've never met before. Nice to meet you. Tell us a little bit something about your company.
So I've owned it for 7 years. We're located in Mattituck. We service pools in addition to construction, masonry, fencing, all in-house. Prided myself on kind of learning everything I could, acquiring all the licenses I could, and trying to be the best, provide the best service, the best quality product that I can.
That's great. Paul, we know each other probably since I've been on the North Forks. We probably met in 2019. Suffolk Security, tell us about yourself.
So I have lived on the North Fork for the last 25, 26 years. I'm originally from Nassau County, Farmingdale, but summered out here my whole life as a kid. Never saw a beach anywhere else but out here. I am the owner of Suffolk Security Systems. We have been in business for 36 years. I've owned it for the last 26 years. We cover the whole East End with a focus primarily on the North Fork and Shelter Island.
That's great. Ben Doroski. Ben, first I want to thank you for putting this episode together on such short notice. Ben, tell us about yourself.
Ben Doroski, custom lighting and stuff, electrical contractor. Started the company in 2001. Really kind of got off the ground 2003, 2004. Been in the trades now 30 years, maybe even more. My father was Doroski Electric, so kind of got my jump start from him. But, he retired in 19. And we were independent from each other business-wise all along. But long time North Fork native, and it's where I'm at.
Great. What are the biggest challenges? Anybody take this. What are the biggest challenges you face as a local business owner today?
Labor.
Probably
The most difficult challenge is finding help. In my business, people are supposed to be fingerprinted, background checked, drug tested, which makes it even more challenging. But nonetheless, it's really difficult. And for a local company, you want to hire local whenever you can and bring the expertise to the table. So finding that talent is often very difficult.
I could agree with Paul in a lot of ways. We're not as stringent. Paul's in the security business, so he has to have all these backgrounds. His guys, and of course, we want good quality guys. But my biggest thing is right now trying to find guys that at least have to have a driver's license, right? Like I can't even have them drive the vehicle. So now the insurance companies are pushing things up to the next level too, where we can't have, if somebody's under 27 years old, the insurance companies don't even want them driving our vehicles. So it's so difficult, right? So now we're really getting into this little teeny spot where we got to find somebody who's of age for the insurance company to allow them to drive. They have to have a driver's license, which if there's any violations, the insurance companies won't let them drive the vehicle either. It's getting more and more difficult, of course, to find good quality employees, whether it's driving or not. But yeah, I mean, that's the problem. And with the wages that we can provide to pay out here, I'll make living wage and actually be able to afford anything to live out here.
Yeah. Jason, you're finding the same thing?
Yes and no. My company's a little different than their interior, their inside homes. Labor force is majority Hispanic, outside labor force. But I'm unique in the sense that I'm bilingual. I'm very, I can talk to my guys. I can level with them. There is no communication gap. Because of that, they're very comfortable here. And I have a great team right now.
That's great.
It's difficult.
So what challenges do you find? Do you have any challenges?
Oh, yeah, of course. A ton of them.
Come on, one of them. What's one of them? Let's go.
Bilingual. I am bilingual, but my office is not. So the lack of their communication to that team, I have to be the bottleneck for all of it. It's difficult with 22 to 24 employees to be at all places at all times. The disconnect between the office and the field, that's a big problem for me. Communication is a big problem. Trying to coordinate all of those things between the two areas, it's very difficult to juggle them both.
Right. Paul, when did you get out to the North Fork?
I've moved out here full-time 26 years ago.
And what inspired you to start or grow your business in South?
Well, I was in the heating oil business prior to that with my family in Nassau County and Suffolk counties. And then we acquired a company in Southold, the heating oil company, Burt's Reliable. When we first bought that company, I was commuting back and forth, running that business until my brother moved out here and he took that over. During that time, we were already selling a low temperature alarm system to customers just to monitor the temperature in summer homes. And we were approached by the previous owner, a guy named Sal Prado that owned Suffolk Security, about partnering with him originally. He was a character for sure, because he'd been laughing already. And but he was knowledgeable, and we partnered with him at first. Then a few years later, he wanted to sell his alarm business outright from what he was doing, and it blended in perfectly what we were doing. Basically, it was the same customer base, the same relationships. We had the model already, and I just went full-time into security 26 years ago. Yeah.
Great. Ben, you brought up insurance earlier. Insurance premiums are rising, policies are being dropped. The renewal processes are becoming more and more stringent and unbearable. How has this affected your business?
Yeah. Right now we're currently going through it because we're facing a renewal very soon, and we're facing probably 100% increase on our general liability coming up this year.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be heavy. There's reasons, right, behind it, but also at the same time, it's going to happen to everybody. And I think when it comes to it in the next 18 months, I think we're going to see a large increase in the labor charges that are for all contractors, you know. And one of the things that I would urge most customers right now, contractors are going to have additionally insured and everything else. It's going to be one of the next new big things, right? Is like, if I have to hire a sub, or if I'm a sub for another contractor, there's going to be a lot of different things that are going on. The insurance company is going to demand, and it's going to become more mainstream that contractors are going to have insurance. Before, insurance certificates always had to be there between contractors, but it's going to be every single job. Whereas before, one insurance certificate would blanket many jobs over the course of the year. It's going to be literally a certificate for every single job pretty soon. And it's going to get hard because it's going to increase paperwork in the office. I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly where the insurance industry is going to go, but it's going to get more and more expensive and more difficult for contractors.
Paul, Jason, you finding this? You having any issues?
Yeah, without a doubt, yes. The increases it's everywhere. It's every year the increase is there. Use your insurances or not. I have machinery, trucks on the road, trailers. As soon as you get a piece of machinery, it's wild what they charge. You never use it, but at the end of the year, what I'm finding is you paid your guys too much, or we didn't realize that your income was going to be at this. You weren't insured for that. We need to be compensated. It's something you can't account for. Are you going to?
That's the best part about it, Jason, right? Like, the better you do, the more the insurance company wants as well.
Yes. Every year it's at December when my renews, and right around Christmas, when, my company, I own a pool company. My business is slower at that time. But they come and they need their check, and that number just keeps increasing. And the insurances every year change. You can shop all you want. The numbers just increase. It's inevitable.
I grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and there was a group of people that used to do that to all the business owners as well.
Yeah.
That's called organized crime.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of different.
Right?
Yes.
It's a shake. A shakedown's a shake.
It's insurance, a different kind of insurance.
Right. Regulated shakedown.
Yeah.
We see it as well. We have very specialized insurance because of the life safety work that we do in smoke detectors and carbon monoxide and burglary. Though there's only a few companies that actually offer those programs to begin with, which makes it even more restrictive and difficult. And, on top of that, the other side of the coin, our clients are required to have insurance. We get calls literally every day from a customer that needs some sort of a certificate from us, proof that they have a fire alarm in their home that's monitored, that they can give to their insurance company to get a premium discount. And the number of people we've seen of our own customers across the East End that have had their insurance just canceled on them is mind blowing.
Fire.
It's just incredible how many insurance companies are pulling out of the markets or not insuring homes that are over a certain value or under a certain value.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a different excuse, and it's really extraordinary.
We saw that just happen in Malibu, right? It's the Pacific Palisades.
Sure.
Policies are dropped, houses burned to the ground. It's like there seems to be a certain entity that doesn't want small business to sustain, let alone survive.
And that's what
Right.
it feels like too, right? I mean, I remember going into business back in 2001, right? My struggles between '01, 02, '03, kind of getting my feet on the ground, buying my first real van, right? Um, as a new business owner back then, I'm not going to say it was easy, right? I don't care what business you're starting, you got to put the work in, 40 hours a week is part-time. You know what I mean? If you're not putting 80 to 100 hours a week in, you're not going to get your business or to any point, right? But what I can say is that it was attainable. It was something that you could do. Now, for young guys that are trying to get into my industry, Paul's industry, Jason's industry, right? Any business for that matter. I can't even imagine trying to come up with the deposits and everything else that has to come out
For sure.
deep enough to get there. Years ago, you could get into it and work your way through it. Maybe not make any money in the beginning, but at least work your way through it. Now, I mean, these numbers are they're daunting. It's insane.
Premiums going up. You're going to pass these increases on to your customers. How does that help you to stay competitive?
Nothing in business is fair. And the worst part is, I mean, when it comes down to it, we don't have a choice. I mean, in order to, it's not necessarily being profitable from my pocket. It's actually just sustaining a business. I mean, it's not even, it has nothing to do with profits. It's just keeping the business alive.
That's true. That's
it's
exactly right. I mean, insurance is not the only cost that's gone up. The price of labor has definitely gone up. We see it. Health insurance is a whole other ball of wax. You could do a whole show on that. That's a nightmare. And you add all that up, you have to raise your prices just to stay afloat on some of the stuff. There's no question about it. And if you're a seasonal business like Jason, it's even more difficult, I would imagine, right?
Listen, let me ask you a question. How many months is it that you actually really don't have a quality income? You must have 3 months of like kind of.
Well, here was the biggest struggle. The pools themselves, 6-8 months, yes. I had to diversify. I had to get into the winter market. I designed a tenting system out of London, brought it in through Rhino Fast Tents to be able to tent, heat, and build pools, but had to diversify into masonry, fencing, basement egresses, so on and so forth, to be able to fill the gaps. So I had to stack winter months with stuff that I could contain in heat and then roll into the summer. So kind of the scheduling itself was a huge thing, but diversifying is what kept me alive. Cost of the product themselves, Benny, the conduit itself, PVC, doubled, tripled.
Oh my gosh, I was talking to another electrician today. Going back, and I hate saying pre-COVID, right? Because it's just it's a painful thing to roll on pre-COVID. PVC, years ago, if we were doing an electrical service and had to run a pipe for like the low voltage coming from the pole to the house, I'm not going to say we throw it in for free, but you could roll pipe and, the cost of PVC into the job. There's not going to get hurt. Now, the cost of PVC is it is unreal.
Benny,
like you said.
How about a breaker? A normal GFCI breaker?
Oh my God. I mean, the company, we have to charge from like $80 a piece, $5 a piece. It's wow. The cost of a breaker. I mean, breakers used to be $4. You know what I mean? And a standard breaker is $8 now. Don't get me wrong. But these specialty breakers, GFI, Arcful, combos, you know what I mean? Combo breakers like $100. It's wild.
Yep. And the other thing that I think we're all dealing with product-wise is Amazon. The product itself that we're buying through distributors, we're number 2, number 3 in line. We warranty our products. People go online and they buy products from an online source, and then it's arguing costs of installation and cost of product when you can buy something on Amazon that I can't buy it for, and there's no warranty involved with it. I found that I have a retail store that there's no retail business, and it's difficult to keep up with. I have a brick and mortar store where a fly-by-night person that doesn't have the licensing or otherwise that I have, they can offer a product less than I can because they don't have the overhead. And in addition, the Amazons, the buying powers of the world, people can get the product less than, cost-wise, less than we can.
Free shipping too. It's crazy. Well, maybe that entity that's stepping on the small business guy is big business. What does Rockefeller say? Competition is sin.
We also have some concerns going in this year with the so-called tariffs that may or may not occur. You know, a lot of product that we buy, while they're American companies, they're bringing the product and making it in Mexico. And they're talking about some 25% tariffs. Who knows if it's going to happen or not? Some of the manufacturers are already looking to retool and go to other countries to manufacture it because of that, just to avoid those big hits, because it'll affect our business. There's no question about it.
I see that affecting everything, every business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
On the flip side, I learned about payroll tax the hard way. I bought my business from my business partner, and he was the back end guy, and I was kind of like the client relations guy. And then had a big job. I made about 7 figures really quick. I didn't know about payroll tax. I got hit with a $40,000 bill 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
That hurt.
And it had interest, and it had all the fees and all the other stuff added into it.
Payroll tax is unconstitutional. Here he's talking about squashing payroll tax and squashing federal income tax. Maybe then the small business can make it, right?
Yeah.
Well,
can that happen?
We'll see. It's all up in the air.
The whole thing with that is, will it really help me as a business owner, help us as business owners, right? I mean, the difference is right now, we reserve that money completely and totally. So it's not like it's going to be passed through, right? If I'm paying my guy $45 an hour and I'm pulling that money back to pay the government, he's getting less. So it could help. It could absolutely help my employees. It'd be amazing, because they essentially, between New York and fed taxes, they're taking about 30% out of their paycheck. And the overtime is what really kills. Overtime's almost punishment, right? Because if they finally get the chance to work overtime, they get time and a half. It's the problem is overtime for us. It kills me.
Kills you with the payroll tax.
I have to. Anytime they break 40 hours, I got to pay time and a half. But there's never a job where I actually get to charge more per hour to the customer. So most of the time, it's just me getting,
Yes.
And then they don't get any benefit on the time and a half, because the taxes just destroy it to the point where, they're getting paid time and a half, but they don't even see it in the check, because the government takes most of that, the excess that they're getting paid. So it's really sad. It really is.
So what systemic changes do you think needs to happen to address this issue, even on a national scale?
I mean, I think insurance has got to be going through immensely, all insurances, especially healthcare. Healthcare industry is destroyed. There's nothing out there that's a good option for my employees anyway. It's very sad. You pay an astronomical amount of money into it. They still have high deductible. There's nothing good out there for the healthcare industry after that. So that's my opinion.
I think I agree with Ben. I think healthcare for me is the most upsetting and frustrating part of all the insurance I deal with. Yeah, I need auto insurance, I need liability insurance, property insurance, got it, right? But health insurance for your employees is really, really important. And this, our system right now is a complete mess. It's so expensive. And my wife happens, I'm fortunate in one respect for myself, that my wife works for a very large corporation that has unbelievable health insurance. And what we pay is less than what I could ever pay for my employees, it's for small business health insurance. It's high expensive. And then what do? Every year, they'll raise the cost of the insurance. And then the only way you can save a few bucks is if you find another carrier, but you raise the employee's deductible. So, it gets absurd and unaffordable for people. And then they're not using it, and then they don't want to pay for it. Then they don't take it. And then you're sitting there with a policy with hardly anybody on it, and they're not getting the benefits of it when they're really sick. And it's a continuous frustrating cycle.
I'm sorry, the deductibles are so high that when they go to use it, they have a huge bill anyway. Right. So it's why even bother? You can just pay
exactly
out of pocket
right.
and not even have the health insurance.
Yeah.
It just is ridiculous.
Lose.
That and the cancellation of the policy itself. I mean, how many times do we have to shop new policies? Seems like every other year. We have to change, we have to move. It's spending the time to do that. It's
Well, that's the other thing too, right? As a business owner, we have no time. I mean, I have no time. I didn't even I've been going since 6 o'clock this morning. I haven't stopped once. You know what I mean? I literally just cleaned up from dinner and came up here at 7:30 now. You know, not complaining about it, but when would I ever have time to spend to shop health insurance? I mean, it's not a fun thing either, right? That's got to be probably.
This is the anniversary time of my business from when I started it, so all my insurance comes due at the same time. So I'm shopping everything and talking to agents, and I hate it. I really hate it. It's difficult to make the right choices for both your company and your employees when it comes to the health insurance part of it.
And even the agents right now, I've never heard so many agents apologize to me.
Yes,
right.
But we don't have anything good for you. Nothing good to say right now.
All this, everything we spoke about so far in the show contributes to inflation, whether you're passing through your insurance premiums to your clients, or your materials are expensive, your insurance is expensive. That brings me into the economy and kind of like leadership accountability. How does the current economic climate impact your ability to sustain or grow your businesses?
I mean, honestly, right now, business seems pretty strong. I don't fear the near future right now for business. Phone calls are coming in. We're getting into February, which is usually the slowest time of the year. February, March is usually just miserable with phone calls. The phone's ringing. I mean, not like it does in July, but there's new jobs coming in. We got new job leads all the time. I mean, I got a crew of 10 guys I have to keep busy. You know what I mean? So that's a lot. And we're making it happen. So I'm not worried about that, but it is the inflation. It's tough to keep up. I try to not raise my rates right now. You know, I really don't want to anger existing customers and existing contractors, but you know, I think we're gonna have to do it this spring. And I already feel that we're on the higher side, but realistically, when it comes down to it, people just don't understand when it comes down to what we charge per hour, but the overhead is it's barely equals the end.
Right. I'm going to change the name of this episode to Insurance, the Business Killer.
Right?
Health insurance, especially. Okay, so I've said in the past, I believe elected officials really need to understand economics. And sometimes the right person that wants to do good and run for office doesn't necessarily understand economics at all. And unless you really own a business and a couple of businesses, can you really get a grasp for what business needs? And most politicians aren't business owners. Paul, I would say all the good you're doing for Southold, I think you should maybe consider a run at office, because I think we need to hold our elected officials accountable. We could cater to the squeaky wheel or the group that yells the loudest, but it's not so beneficial to the town's economy, and the town's sustainability. I don't believe they're making the best decisions for our business owners. Paul, I just saw that you're part of the North Fork Chamber. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm back on the board. Back on the board again.
I would love to see the Chamber rally, or at least represent, a large majority of our community and speak to our politicians, kind of like the Civic Association does. That seems like our politicians are always catering to the Civic, and every decision they make is always in line with the Civic wants, and never for the businesses. But what do you think?
Well, let me address that a little. First of all, I've been on the North Fork Chamber in the past. At one point, I was a member of 5 different chambers on the East End. A lot of them have consolidated, and which is a lot easier instead of going to 5 different meetings a month. But I've always been pro-business, pro-advocate for the other people. Ben and I are also in another group that promotes business amongst its members, and that's been really great for us. However, I think there's a great misunderstanding from a lot of people who live out here about just how difficult it is to run a business out here and what's involved with that. Excuse me. I think there is an absolute place for the civic groups in our community. And I don't doubt that for a second. I think It's good for them to be engaged and involved and have their arguments or their concerns approached. What I don't like when they become is a lobbying platform, and the original intention of the groups when they were first started, from the woman that started it all, that was never the intention that there would be lobbying groups. They were to inform and give people information that they can go home and do with what has been a long and arduous challenge. I went to every civic group meeting that the town held just to see the perspective from each of the individual hamlets and to see what people were saying and how they were responding. And there was a lot of not NIMBYism, not in my backyard, or change this. There was some people who just said, well, if we're going to save land and that property's for business, we should just change it to residential. Or change. There was a lot of misunderstanding of how zoning works in a lot of those meetings. There was one meeting that was held by the Economic Development Council in the town at Raphael Vineyards that was for business, for the businesses to come forward. And there were a lot of people that came forward, a lot of businesses that spoke. It was very informative. And in fairness, there were one or two people that came from civic groups that approached me afterwards and said they were glad they came because it gave them more perspective on the challenges of business and what we're up against here. But I think what's happened is, my perception, it's what's going on at Town Hall, is they're flexing too much to what the civics are asking for and requesting. There are certain projects that have occurred in this town that are still ongoing, hotels and others where property was properly zoned prior to it, and people went out in force and outrage trying to stop it. I could go on, but the real point being that there's room for both the civics and the business community. The major problem is the business community isn't loud enough. We can't get enough people to rally, come to meetings, talk about our concerns. And it's not just the restaurants and the little shops that the tourists like to visit. It's guys like Jason, me, Ben, and a host of hundreds of other companies out here and their employees that are struggling every day.
And the problem is, for a business owner, it doesn't end. It's a 12-hour day. You know what I mean? 13, 14-hour day. It's so these are the people that have time, they can do it. It's very difficult to find the time to stay consistent on these meetings.
I'll give you an example, and I'm not even in my own business. Let's just talk about landscapers for a second, right? Now, my landscaper gets paid a lot of money from me. I don't know a landscaper out here that's not inexpensive. I think but when you look at their costs and you have them explain it to them, the cost of fuel, the cost of labor, the cost of trucks, the cost of the equipment they've got, and now they can't operate leaf blowers at certain times of day, or they're banning the gas leaf blowers. Now they got electric leaf blowers, and those cost money. And now they got to put inverters on their trucks. Now they got to get more batteries. It goes on and on and on. And there's a certain cost to all of that. And it's driving, and that's not even including insurance, right? That's just the basics operation of your business, of materials and supplies and what you need just to get people to show up at your front.
It's no longer the 14-year-old kid with a push lawnmower coming to do the lawn.
That's right.
But as a business owner, we also understand the costs that therein lie. So it's kind of biased on our sides because we understand those costs.
You understand it. That's right.
Yeah, we agree with them.
Right.
There are people that are shopping around or otherwise, and they want to argue the costs. Don't understand the costs that we incur just to open our doors in the morning. It's a very difficult conversation to have with someone, and I find myself explaining it to more clients than not of just the general costs of owning a brick and mortar store. It's not just that. It's the insurance.
Well, also, Jason, think about this. I mean, just going back 5 years ago, what we were actually paying hourly rates to our employees, salaries to our employees, right? I mean, just in the past 5 years has exponentially, numbers that I'm paying these guys
doubled.
Right? It just doesn't even make any sense to me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm happy to have them. I'm happy to have the higher paid guys that I have because they're excellent mechanics, excellent,
Here.
But it's just the fact that cost to even have them around is just
to not have someone commute 40 minutes to get here. The cost of living where we live is very high. If you have somebody that has a skill set, we need to compensate them to ensure that they're going to stay with us. It's a very real thing to not be held hostage, but understand the cost of living and compensating someone for working at our companies is a real thing. We have to increase what we pay them to keep them local and keep them with us.
I would throw a number out there that it costs roughly $150 for the first hour of any of us to show up at your front door. Roughly. I mean, people go, that's outrageous. And then your guy can be in there for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, but just to get there today with all of our costs.
I mean, Paul, think about this too. The cost of a van, right? I just bought another truck, I don't know, 6-7 months ago, right? Bought a truck that's work truck. Nothing special. I mean, nothing special at all. It was almost $80,000 for this truck. You know what I mean? And we have to have 6 trucks. You know what I mean? So you add up the cost of just the vehicles alone. We got probably close to $500,000 in vehicles in my park sitting right now.
Yeah,
You know
and Vince, we used to buy the smaller minivans just for service on small service stuff, and we'd have a few of those. They don't even make them anymore.
Yeah.
Because the car manufacturers, it's not profitable to make the small van. So now you got to buy a big van whether you need it or not. And they're 70 grand.
Yeah.
Maintenance on your vehicles,
Right.
like fuel,
Everything.
it's
Come
all
on.
there.
Yeah. I mean, for me, $70,000, $80,000 for the truck. And then once you finally get the truck, then you got to put the rack bins and outfit the whole thing. So, you got to throw another, $30,000. Having a truck roll down the road, that vehicle, right, is at least $100,000 between the cost of the vehicle and the material that's inside. Then put two mechanics in it. I mean, it's just
Pursuit of happiness. Huh?
It'll be fun.
Right. Fucking crazy. Sorry, my dog's barking. All right. What advice would you give town officials to ensure the rezoning process supports both businesses and the community?
big question with way too many answers. I think we need to simplify the question maybe, because that's like, there's so many different things in there. I mean, I don't know.
You brought up, Paul, you brought up the rezoning. So it could be that someone who has a property that's zoned industrial that has a certain price value couldn't get rezoned to ag. It could go that way. And it could go the complete opposite way. It could go all this ag that property rights are sold gets rezoned. For some reason, this should never happen. But if it does, I'm going to have to scratch my head. Should get zoned to R80 or R40 or whatever, right?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things should happen. I think it's time for the town legislators to have a business meeting, right? Not the economic council is great and they could help organize it, but all the legislators should be there. There should be a pro-business meeting. Maybe it's through the chambers of commerce, but it has to be more aggressively discussed, or a forum through Times Review or what have you. I think that would be critical. Zoning, they're way behind on zoning right now, where they're supposed to be. They had hired a company, consulting firm to work with the planning department on the zoning definitions. And those meetings were supposed to be all finished and done with a presentation to all of us in March, which is just 2 months away. All right. So that isn't going to happen. They haven't even gotten their reports back yet. At a chamber meeting that I went to recently where Al Krupski spoke, our supervisor, I did make one comment, and he did take it to heart, but I haven't seen any change. When they started the zoning process, they created an email sign-in sheet on the town website where you could put your name in, and they'll keep you informed as to the progress and what's happening with zoning. That was 6 months ago. Not a single email has been sent out from the town regarding any of the updates, or just tells them there's no news. Say, hey, here's where we are. Here's the delays. Let us know, right? Instead, we're waiting on information from the civic groups. I've gotten more information from them than the town. And
Right.
Why is that? Why isn't the town being more proactive? They initiated this whole zoning practice. They went forward with it. You want to keep people involved. You want to hear from us. You want us to get on board with whatever the plan is, then keep us in the loop. And they're just not doing that.
I mean, I can't even imagine if they ever rezoned ag to something else. I mean, I could only imagine the uproar. That would just be
Right. That's good.
I mean, I guess anything's possible, right? But
Right.
like, I can't even imagine if that was ever done. I just think the uproar would be.
Well, I think the
Huntington
planning
happened.
department.
Huntington happened, right? It had to happen somehow, some way.
Yeah, I think the planning department and zoning is definitely a little bit behind the eight ball here. And I mentioned this at two meetings with Heather Lanza about what is allowed. Like in Cutshaw on Griffin Street, where the post office is, there are 4 new homes that went up there, residential homes. That property was zoned commercial. All right. With the idea being that eventually, as Cutshaw grew, you could have more shops, stores, possibly stores with affordable housing above them at that space. And they were allowed to build residential homes on there. That should have never happened. I can't build.
The owner of the property, I knew about that. The owner of the property, that was one lot all the way from
Yeah, I know.
the post office all the way down to
Yeah, they
school.
subdivided it,
and he subdivided it, and then he changed it to whatever residential.
right. But
I
there's
don't know exactly like you said. I don't know how that was ever allowed, pushed through. That's absolute property that should have been set aside for commercial use.
right. There's case after case of that in the town. And from all of our businesses, we talk about finding labor and affordable places to live. There was an ideal spot right there. You could add some nice apartments above those storefronts that people could live in at reasonable rates, and that was allowed to happen. And my belief is this town really doesn't care too much about affordable housing.
Guys, there is a solution to our affordable housing situation that's already on the books, and I really don't know the specifics of it, but I think we could look it up. Where if you have an accessory garage
Yes.
past like 1988 or before something like that, you could put an apartment above it, right? And they're declining
There's
these
some things
applications
going on right
left
now.
and right.
There's some infill housing that's possible in the halo zones and the split use zones. There's some stuff out there. I think people have to do a lot of their own homework to kind of find those areas that can be done.
But even if you have these options, Ben, and the town is declining these applications left and right or dragging it out so long that you don't have the wherewithal as the homeowner, we have the solution that, and even here's the best part, the Civic Association is big for affordable housing. It's one of their pushes, but yet we never seem to get it. So
Vince, I'll tell you a little more. I mean, the issue of the accessory buildings on existing properties is fine. It does then increase density in a neighborhood. Now you got to worry about another car or two on the street or lot, right? And then that's a quality of life issue that some people don't want. There's a NIMBY issue there. However, I'm going to tell you one last thing. I was on a Hamlet stakeholders committee for Cutchogue on a rezoning project in 2003. All of this was laid out. We picked the areas within the hamlet where potentially affordable housing could be done, as well as the other hamlets.
I don't know.
Some people than the zoning board themselves. There's a lot of distrust in the zoning department of people saying they're going to do one thing and doing a complete other. Setting a precedent is the other thing that kind of inhibits progress of if I accept it in one place, I have to accept it in all. I understand these things, add pressure on them to make the right decisions. And there's a lot of pushback from the town themselves. Progression themselves from, to your point of having this new community that we have that is, it's new to all of us. It's a needed entity to keep us all alive. The pushback on zoning to not allow these things to progress, it's there. There's a ton of pressure on them as well. Making a decision and setting laws in place is tough for them, and it's making it tough on us. We don't know what we can and cannot do, and asking permissions and not knowing what something's zoned. How do we proceed when we don't get answers? Very difficult for a business owner to not know what the rules and regulations are because they're not set. It's a difficult time to own a business when they don't really understand. They're wading through new waters. We're at the cusp right now of what rules and regulations are going to be set into place. They don't know. There are no answers.
And even if you have the zoning and you're allowed to do it, you're still going to have at the very least a 2 year.
I think that's the problem too, right? Even if you have the zoning and you're allowed to do it, there's so many
2 years
that they could just get pushback on. You know what I mean?
Who has to carry the wherewithal to spend that money frivolously or, come on.
And then that's the problem too. The
profitability.
costs that are involved to hold these things, they can get very difficult to the point where they wear people out and they back down because they just realize that even if it's a project that's $1 million, $2 million, whatever the project is, it's going to take 18 months to 36 months to even get there. And the holding cost involved to even do a $2 million project could be,
Lawyers' fees,
lawyers'
traffic
fees.
studies,
Standard permit's 10 weeks out.
permit.
A standard
Yeah.
10 weeks.
I mean, that's
Yep.
the problem too, is the permit process, right? I mean, that's what kills a lot of jobs. And it kills contractors too. I mean, these guys are lined up, sitting around waiting to go, and it just kills you. The permitting process is another thing. One of the other things that I don't understand is why everything's got to be done by paper and handed in the building department like it is, right? We work with independent electrical inspection agencies that have nothing to do with Suffolk Town. Suffolk Town doesn't allow them to come in. They have their own electrical inspectors, which is fine. I'm not complaining about that. But we have to go into the town with paperwork and paper checks and do this slow process. So, but the outside electrical inspection agencies that we work with, they accept credit cards and all the applications go in right over that application.
On Southall.
So it can be done, right? But everything is done slow. They have these paperwork. They, I talked to the inspectors. Oh, we don't know where that is. We can't find it. I mean, if everything was just documented, they could have, iPads. Things could be done so much quicker.
Think it's a coincidence that we have all these factors or organizations or squeaky wheels that are anti-business and shun you if you're successful, let alone sustainable. And then you have a building department that's anti-business by just this process alone, right?
I think it's just antiquated. I mean, I think they got a lot of work to step up to their next level. I don't know if that's done necessarily on purpose.
I spent $2 million on a roof. I could get a website built for probably $10,000.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I just think that the problem is, again, when it comes down to, I'm not saying all politicians, but most politicians do not understand this. That's what it realistically comes down to. Because if they did put some money into some positive changes in the town, things could get done so much more smoothly, not only for the employees that have to deal with it. I mean, listen, I deal with the inspectors, I deal with the girls that are in the town. They're all great people that I deal with there. And they face the same challenges that I'm talking about. You know what I mean? It's just the town not going to the next step to get the technology in place that they really need.
Right. Paul, I think you could do great things for the chamber.
Well, yeah, the chamber. Don't ask me about running for politics again, because that's not going to happen.
I mean, listen, Paul volunteers way too much.
Oh, it's at the chamber.
You got to stop, blocking them from these things.
Yeah, right. Politics interest me, but not enough to run. My wife is
My
wife is interested in running, and she'll do a better job than me. But the business side of it, being involved and engaged, I've always listened. And just like Ben grew up out here, and Jason's business is family owned and stuff. All of us have a connection to the community here, right? And I've always focused our business on giving back to the community in ways we can. First, by finding employees that live here locally and feel like they want to belong, and then secondly, if we're fortunate enough to have some monies that we can donate or help or volunteer with, and then we do it. As you may know, I'm a chairperson for the Stony Brook East Long Island Hospital Foundation. It's an inordinate amount of time spent and monies that we help contribute and help raise for the hospital. But it's important, right? We can't lose that hospital. We need it. And if I can use my business to leverage some people to donate, then I'm going to do that. But it's expensive across the board on all these things that we do. And if I can use any kind of supposed influence that I have to help others in the business community, then I'm going to do it through the business side of things.
Well, that's why I started the show. I honestly think there's certain things in town that maybe people don't want said. And I think we need to give the platform for the people that want to say it. I think this show could be used to get our elected officials to represent the people and not so much special interest groups or lobbyists, or whether they be registered or unregistered. And that's who these decisions could be being made for, which is anti-small business owner and anti-farmer. And that's two of the things. I used to be a farmer and I loved it. I went from being an investigator dealing with drama and toxicity and misery to dealing with agriculture, life, planting something and watching it grow. And then you have all these challenges as a farmer. let alone a small business owner. And you're like, wait a second, I just got into something I love that is positive and gives back, and you can't make it work. And beating up your head up against the wall trying to make it work. And that's how you guys are feeling right now every day, trying to just make enough money to keep the lights on, let alone feed your family and stay in a neighborhood that's very expensive. It costs a lot of money to stay in, right? So on top of all those costs for your business, you still have your cost of living. So you got to make that much more.
Yeah. And, and that's an issue. Listen, living on Long Island is not cheap to begin with, right? I mean, in some respects, Southfield Town property taxes are less expensive than other parts of Long Island, but they're still up there. My taxes this past year, we did a renovation to our home. Wasn't gigantic, just needed it after this house was built in the 1950s. My taxes went up 68%.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Dennis Non-Caro. I don't know if you need an expert.
I know. I know. Yeah. I've been down at town hall already about it, but it's.
But so going back to the tax base, right? Suffolk Town is rather, like you said, Paul. We're not going to say affordable, but it's one of the lower tax bases around, right? Let's face that. But the problem is, any of the employees right now. I mean, I remember
Exactly.
I remember back in 6 or whatever it was, something like that. I bought my first house, right? You know what I mean? And that's not that long, And first house, I think it was $350,000 that I paid for my first house. Now that house in particular is probably worth well over $700,000 right now. You know what I mean? Like, and we're only talking about it. I don't feel that was that long ago. 6 is a while, but it's not. And to double in that time frame, it's very, very difficult for people now, especially my employees, to get into a $700,000 home. It's just it's a lot, and that mortgage to carry between mortgage taxes and insurance.
Yeah, I mean, and we're paying some good numbers to our employees, very competitive numbers. And I get employees living in a parent's house, renting an apartment above somebody else's home. The realm of where they're living is just to make ends meet is challenging.
And I think also when it comes down to it, when they talk about workforce housing, when they talk about just employee housing out here, I think locals get this, I don't know, stigma about what might be. My guys, I don't have anybody who's a drunk. I don't have anybody who does drugs. You know what I'm saying? I have 10 employees. Now, maybe they drink occasionally, right? Just like anybody else would, but there's nobody who's an extreme. That's right. My guys are all good, clean, hardworking, family men. And when it comes down to it, it's very, they can't find affordable living out here. Just something that's more affordable than, $3,000 a month, would just be, it's what we need. It's an absolute necessity. I remember even going back 20 years ago, there was no rentals out here even 20 years ago, right? And it's only
no what?
Rentals. Like
20
years, 30 years with no year-round rentals, or not enough. But right now, it just doesn't exist. I have a property now that I'm purchasing so that I can rent out year-round. And just to try and look online and look around for comps to see what I could or should be looking at to charge for monthly year-round rental, you can't even find it because it doesn't exist. So it's not, you go to the Suffolk Times or some of the local type of place where you'd find like year-round rentals. Nothing exists to even find.
Yeah, the rest of them are Airbnbs.
Right? Yeah. Or as soon as a year-round rental, it's gone.
Or the people that are trying to do it correctly through the Airbnbs or otherwise for a 2-week rental, and you have that whole other sector of people that don't register. And there comes the mistrust back to the town. Everything they're dealing with, going back and dealing with people that aren't doing things correctly, is tying up the process. If it was managed correctly in a way in which, Ben, to your point, that it could be done online, that was a feasible timeline or a price point or whatever it may be, that you could get a reasonable response with reasonable results, I think people would be more prone to doing the process.
Absolutely. People would do things correctly and legally and straightforward if it was fine-tuned and it was a direction as to how to do it, right? But you go to the town and nobody wants to give an answer.
Direct answer, no.
They all feel liable if they give you something wrong or misguide you, so they just don't give you an answer.
The amount of work that I've missed out on because I am very pro permit. And the business that I own, it's very important to me. I do things the right way. I refuse to do things without permits. I do it correctly. And I have people outsourcing to other companies that are willing to do it without permits. I'm missing out on that because they don't have the license. They don't do the insurance. And they're willing to do it without permits. They come in, they leave, and then they need to source a local guy like myself to come in and fix the mess. The permitting's twice as long in the reverse. Do it correctly once, and it's not a problem. If people, other business owners, local or not, were being held to that, I think it would free up a lot of space at the town because they wouldn't be having to deal with things that would be done and processed correctly instead of having to go through it 2 or 3 times.
Absolutely.
Right. How do you guys see your role in preserving the character of our small town community?
I mean, that's a good question. You know, when it comes down to it, I try to represent my company and have my guys represent the company to the highest standards possible. I don't want to say a high-end company, but we run a high-standard company, right? We use technology, we embrace technology. We have weekly trainings, right? So, like, I train my guys on electrical every Tuesday morning. We're at the office from 6:30 to 7:30. You can literally drive past my office on the North Road and see that front porch all lit up at 6:30 in the morning. The guys are there. We're going through like whole electrical training. So all the guys are getting right from the theory of electric all the way through. So we're staying on top of all the codes. All the team talks together about what's up and coming. If there's any questions or if people have questions about code in my team, we're there to answer it for each other. So, I mean, holding my team and my crew up to a higher standards is what I would say.
Great answer. Paul?
Well, from a character standpoint of the community, I think certain things within zoning have to be maintained or improved on. Building height, building envelope on the size of a piece of property. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I mean, I think there's a problem with if we start to see the McMansions coming up here, you know. But there's a twofold part to that, right? I mean, everyone always likes to reminisce about the way it was, right? And, oh, it was so much better back then and stuff. You know what? That's a constantly moving target. You know, people today, 30 years from now, are going to say, I remember when it was better, you know? So there's issues. As long as we don't have situations where we have, like in all the train stations now have these monster affordable housing apartments, right? Ronkonkoma, they're huge, right? There's one in Farmingdale, and from my parents' old house, I used to see a line of trees. They were kind of on a hill, and now I see this big monster apartment down the way. You know, so I don't think we're going to see that out here. God forbid we start seeing a monster apartment building like that at the Matatuck train station. But there's a certain amount of New Englanders type character to the area that's constantly evolving. My parents' first summer home out here, where I summered my whole life, was a tiny little cottage with a front porch and a rear porch. When we first moved into that house, the bunk beds in the back would slide down because the porch was on the floor was on an incline. My office building, where I am now on the main road in Southold, was an old house. The floor is not level because the front half of the office space was a porch. You know, so but my goal, and we're going to be looking at doing renovations to the building, is to still keep the character of that block and that street and make it look as best we can. Yeah, fill the floor. But you know, I think that's an issue that everyone has to look at. But you also have to be open-minded to change. Everything changes, right? I remember tons of potato farms. They're all gone. Now they're all vineyards. Okay, well, most of them are, right, or something else. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's preserved a lot of farmland. It's preserved a certain way of life. It's also brought a tremendous amount of tourism out here. In my office, and it's the last thing I'll say, I have a map. It's from the 1950s of fishing on the North Fork. Come to Southold Town to fish, and it showed all the marinas and all the places to fish, right? And the waters were so great, everybody would come to fish out here. The farmers used to have water rights out in the bays because they would use those water rights to acquire menhaden that they would then take out and use on their fields to fertilize their fields. We need to preserve farmland, marinas, and we can go on more and more about this septic, the whole 9 yards, and sewer districts that I think we should have. There's a whole host of things we could talk about.
I mean, we could have a whole podcast on the septic stuff.
Yeah. But character is a moving target, in my opinion. I think there's always going to be progress, and there's always going to be changes in character along the way.
I just hope we could keep the open spaces. Because that's the North Fork.
Sure.
You can have,
Yeah, you like an open space, but if that was my property and I wanted to tear it down and put a house up because it's zoned residential, too bad. So there are property rights too. There's got to be a balance.
I also think it goes back to what Vincent was saying before with the DES rights, right? I mean, if something's DES, it should be made DES. I mean, can that be rezoned? And that should be enough. But
well, it's supposedly sold in perpetuity, but it's amendable. And the amendments never seem to go in the way of the original property owner. They always seem to go in the way of land preservation. That's another whole conversation. But land preservation owns the rights, and they're the ones able to amend their legal easements. They're the ones who worded it. They're the ones who made it so restrictive for a farmer to evolve. They're the ones who can take it out of perpetuity, I'm pretty sure. So when something happens, when that farm goes out of business and our open spaces, and yes, I'm all for a house or two on a piece of farmland if you're zoned for it, if you can carve it out, if you can go through the process. I don't think the process should be as strict, but agriculture is going to die. We mentioned vineyards. Vineyards with this labor is going to kill vineyards. You have the unions knocking on everybody's door. The character is about to change. I bring up character because everybody loves what the North Fork is, and everyone's fighting to try to keep it. But being so strict, you're going to force your businesses to close. You're going to force your farms to close. And then you're going to have all this overgrown land, and we don't have the character that I think everyone moved out for.
Well, maybe. I mean, there's a flexing of zoning that has to happen. There's a little bit of stuff with zoning that shouldn't happen. Jason's building, when I was a kid, that's where we used to get my Evan motor fixed when that was a little more. Yeah, right?
Well,
Jason actually summered. I summered. What's that?
Walter Koch talked to him last week.
Yeah. I summered on Sigsbee Road. That's when I first came out here. Right. We used to walk up to what was then Dairy Queen. Now it's the Magic Fountain. So you got a small business in the same building that Jason's still in. You still got an ice cream shop at the top of the block. The bowling alley's gone, and that's a CVS, but that's been gone for years already. So there's going to be some change.
Correct.
But if it's restrictive and done right, I'm kind of glad that hardware store didn't get built on the corner there at Love Lane. I think that would have been a kind of a disaster. But now that the town's bought it, do something with it. They said they're going to make a park there.
That was another weird thing, though. That was as of right. That was a weird thing.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm happy it's not a hardware store too, but one thing that I get upset about is the as of right.
Absolutely.
Right? Something's as of right to build. Like you said, I mean, I don't necessarily want to see another hotel, but when it's as of right, you can't argue it.
That's exactly right. That's right.
Guys, I think we had a great show. What do you think?
Yeah, it was a nice conversation. Thanks, Vince.
Good
You're
luck.
a good moderator, Vince.
Thanks, Paul.
All right.
Listen, I really want to work with the chambers. I'm kind of calling them out, but I'm